Hey everyone, Chris here for Thomann Guitars and Basses. In today's Guitar Tech Tips Q&A video, we talk about fret buzz, about Floyd Rose issues and setups, about piezo pickups for classical guitars, and some more. Let's go! Let's start with a question about traditional tremolos. This is from Overcome8628. Which way do you turn an Allen wrench on a traditional tremolo when you have fret buzz on the low E string? A traditional tremolo looks something like this. And you have two tiny screws with which you can decide on going up or going down with the string action, or well, with the whole string really. And if you want to make sure that the string goes up, you need to go clockwise with the Allen wrench. And of course, you need to make sure that the two screws make sure that the saddle sits straight and doesn't tilt in any direction. Those screws have to be turned the same amount, obviously, because you want the string to sit in the middle of the saddle without that being tilted and without that traveling whilst vibrating. Let's continue with a life hack about swapping pickups on semi-hollow guitars. This one came from Modernist Mixing, and he says, do not F around with the pots, just loosen the old pickups out of place, cut the wiring going to the pots, then hook the wire up from the new pickups to the cut wires going into the pot cavity. Yeah, it's ugly, but you're going to get rid of the old crappy pickups anyways, and it's easier than having to deal with this. Yeah, totally, but I only recommend doing this if you have like a really affordable semi-hollow and you know that those pickups are not worth anything, that the old ones you remove, because if you just cut off the wire of a pickup, you literally ruin the value of those. So if you have like a nicer guitar and you just don't like the pickups, don't do that. Otherwise, if it's a really affordable one and you would not really find use or don't want to sell the old ones, yeah, sure, it's not elegant, but it's a good little life hack, sure. The next one is from Eric Bias 6715, and it's about Floyd Rose setups. He is having problems with his strings. When he picks the string, it goes out of tune, and then after a while, it goes back into tune. And he also says in the video, I said that Floyd Rose has to be flush with the body, and his leans forward because of probably the string tension. He also writes, I guess what I'm getting out of your video is that I need to either tighten the screws in the back to the springs, these ones, while the lock nuts are unlocked just to make it flush with the body. Do I have that correctly? Yes. Yeah, so the first thing is with a Floyd Rose, the base plate of the Floyd, let me turn the guitar, you see it better. This base plate of the Floyd needs to be as flush with the surface of the body as possible. This is still fine. It leans a little to the front, but it's pretty much parallel. If it's like this, that's not cool. If it leans forward like this, that's also not very ideal. In order to achieve that, you need to unlock the locking nuts, obviously, tune the guitar, and then see where how the base plate of the Floyd looks like. If it leans forward, like in your case, Eric, then tighten these two screws. With this, you pull the whole thing back and the balance will be better for the bridge, which is great. But once you have that done, you will still probably have this issue of picking the strings out of tune, because that has to do something with how stable the whole system is, not how it's set up, like how the base plate of the tremolo is positioned. The problem is, I think that the string tension is too low, and because of that, you probably pick a little too hard for those strings. Let's say you use 9-42 and you have like a pretty, strong picking hand. With that, you will pick those strings out of tune if you hit them quite hard, especially on a Floyd that reacts to every little nuance. And if it's set up to be that subtle and that bendable or like fluttery, like this, then you will just pick those strings out of tune. In that case, I would recommend maybe using one additional spring at the back. If you have two, then use three. If you have three, maybe try four, even though they might be a little too tough to use then later, but that will stabilize the whole thing and you will have less issues with picking the strings too hard and let those sort of go out of tune. You could also, of course, go for one like half a gauge or a full gauge thicker, like 9.5 to 44 instead of 9 to 42, or even 10 to 46 instead of 9s. Those are the factors that will help you keep that pitch when you hit the strings, and you will not pick them out of tune. Moving on, still floyd rose setups. This is from ypesty2712. I'm tuning to E flat right now, and I can't get it in tune anymore. The best thing one can do when going lower, like going for a lower tuning or a higher tuning, whatever it is to compensate with a different string gauge. So if you use, let's say, 9s for E standard, 9 to 42, then maybe go for 9.5 to 44 for E flat standard, and then go for 10 to 46 if you go D standard. Like, try to balance out the change of tension with thicker strings if you go lower with the tuning. That will help you to have much less to work on in terms of floyd setup, because you will have to compensate probably. So you will have to work those two screws and make them go further in or come further out compared to your normal E standard tuning, but it's going to be much less of an issue, and you will be much less out of balance with your whole system if you try to compensate for the change of tension because of the lower tuning with a thicker gauge string set, which will then, of course, as told, sort of help and compensate. All right, here's one for basses. This came from Kushking420. Does this fit on a Fender Mexico jazz bass? We're talking about the Hipshot D tuner that goes on basses, and you can flick a little lever that will drop your E string down to D. And you're asking if this works on a Mexico, like a made in Mexico Fender jazz bass. There is a model, like they make one for American-made Fender basses, for Mexican-made ones, for other brands, etc. We'll put a link in the description below. You can check that out. They have a number of products that will fit all kinds of like main basses. Next one is from Artemios9956. Should the groove of the nut be strictly according to the diameter of the string, or is it acceptable to have a little more? It's totally acceptable. Most guitars come with nut grooves prepared for like 10 to 46, even though maybe the factory strings are 9 to 42. That's absolutely fine. The only issue is when you have like nut prepared for like 12 to 64, some crazy thick gauge strings, and then you go back to 9s. That's not going to end up well. But other than that, if it's 1 or 2 gauge wider filed than the strings you're using, you're going to be fine. Next one is from Christian with a K, 7520. Will this work on classical nylon string guitars? We're talking about piezo pickups. I made an episode on installing piezo pickup in a steel string acoustic guitar. You can do the same thing for a classical as well. You need, of course, a fitting model. Like you need piezo pickups that are made for classical guitars because of the measurements and, of course, the voicing of the preamp, which is going to be different compared to steel string like Western acoustic guitars. The only thing that will not work on classical guitars is a magnetic pickup. Those are the pickups that will go in a sound hole of like a steel string acoustic. Nylon strings are not magnetic, so magnetic pickups will not work. All the other types, whether it's a transducer, undersaddle piezo pickup, or a system like a pickup system where there's also a mic involved, those will sound nice, those will work for sure. Just make sure you take one that is made for nylon string guitars, and you're gonna be fine. Cougar or Cougar321 is really upset with luthiers. The tool thing with stainless steel frets is bullcrap. I've been using the same tools for years, and all I use is stainless frets. Get some big number 4 wire cutters, then use the Dremel to fine-tune the nip and shorten them. The only thing that takes longer is leveling. You're dealing with files and sandpaper. A leveling file takes them down quickly. Don't need longer than like 15 minutes. Sandpaper is cheap. Screw you luthiers, you're liars about the difficulty and expense. I absolutely understand what you mean with it not ruining your tools right away and it's just a couple of minutes longer, etc. That is all you need to know when you're doing a couple of these guitars. Like, you take care of your own guitars, even if you have a lot of them, it's just a different pace compared to a workshop where you do dozens of guitars per day. You will simply have less guitars done that day if you do a couple of stainless steel guitars compared to nickel. And that, time is money. It's one of those things where those few minutes extra that you need to spend on a stainless steel guitar will add up to a much bigger number, and you need to consider that when you put a price tag on a service. That's the thing. It's not that those 7 minutes are just so huge if you're doing it yourself. It's just those 7 minutes add up really quickly, and you need to adjust your prices accordingly. If you have good tools, those will handle a lot of stainless steel frets as well. But still, at the end of the day, it's going to be useless much faster compared to just doing nickel fret guitars. So yeah, on a personal level, you're absolutely right. If you want to compare your situation to a bigger workshop, it just doesn't work that way. Next one is from Seki78. Question: I heard in some videos it is not good to remove all the strings at once. What do y'all think about that? Is it safe to remove all strings at once or not? It's perfectly fine. Like, the only thing I would not recommend is like on a 6-string bass or 5-string bass to just have them under tension and then just cut the strings, because that's like a radical change. That's pretty stressful for the wood and the neck and the whole guitar, really. So definitely first reduce the tension, loosen the strings, and then cut them off one by one if you want to clean the whole fretboard, for example, or the bridge, or just maintain your instrument. You don't always have to remove all the strings at the same time. You can go string by string, especially on guitars with sensitive tremolos. I would do that. I would just go one by one and remove the E string, tune the new one, then get the A off and put on the new one, etc. It's just much more convenient, I guess. But as soon as I want to clean the fretboard, I want to do anything, just don't worry about it. I know a couple of people, last person I talked about this subject was one of the main, super important people at Martin Guitars. And he has dozens of really old, vintage Martins at home, a proper collection. And most of those guitars just sit around in their cases in nice humidity, controlled circumstances, but with the strings loosened. So there's no tension coming from the strings, and they sit there maybe for 5 years until the strings get changed, tuned up, been played a bit, and then the strings will get loosened again and be stored that way. None of those necks have any issues. So if someone wants to scare you with that, just don't take it too seriously, but it's not necessary to remove all the strings at the same time, all the time, every time you change them. And the last one is the most in-depth and the toughest one. So let's get into it. Kata Rusu asks, thanks for the tips. I have a problem. I can't find the cause. I have a fret buzz from the 8th to the 14th fret, but only on the high E string. So it's the middle of the neck, really. I'm using Earnable gauge 10 to 46. Can you please give me some tips? Thank you. Okay, so there are 3 possible steps to solve this issue. The first is most definitely the neck setup. You have to make sure that the neck curve is fine, which means that it should not be dead straight, but it also should not hang a lot and should definitely not have a bump in the middle. So what you first want to do, if you never checked the neck on your guitar, is to look down the neck. You can do this from the heel side, from the body. Just look at the edge of the neck and look if it does something weird. You can also do that from up here. Just look down the neck. That is not very accurate, but you can clearly see if there's some sort of a wave in the neck, or if the 2 edges don't run in a parallel manner, which would be an issue, of course. If the low E string side does this and the high E string is straight already, or does this, then you're having an issue. That's a twisted neck, really, and that's the biggest problem you could possibly have. Normally, it's going to be fine. You can see some sort of a curvature. Then if you want to make sure that you nail the neck relief, you push down the 1st fret, you push down around the 17th or 15th fret and go as much in the middle as possible with one of your fingers. I guess the index is the best for that. And check if there's some tiny movement, like some gap between the string and the surface of that fret, which is in this case the 7th now for me. And if I do that, I can hear that clicking noise and I can see a tiny bit of a movement. That's exactly what you want to see on a neck that's set up for a nice and comfortable low action. If you have a lot of gap between the string and the top of the fret, then your neck is too loose, you need to tighten it. If there's no movement, the string is sitting on top of those frets in the middle, then your neck is damn straight, or even more, it has like a bump in the middle, so you need to loosen that neck. Once you're done with that, you have to take care of the saddle. Like the string action is going to be set up by the height of the saddle once the neck is fixed, as told. You can do that to set up your E string. That's the string where you have your buzz between the 8th and the 14th. Set it up for a nice and comfortable action. And if you still have buzz, then the third step comes into play, which is the biggest issue. That's where you'll need one of these. This is a fret rocker with which you can test 3 frets together, like the 8th, 9th, and 10th, or for you, it's the 8th, 9th, and 10th, and see if this thing rocks. If it's fine, if none of the frets are taller than the others, then you move one further. Then you go for 9, 10, 11, then 10, 11, 12, etc. You go ahead and check all those frets if any of them are too tall or too low, because that's, again, a reason why in a certain section of a neck, you can have more issue on a certain string even than like on the others or on other spots of that neck. So that is the last thing. If you see that one of the frets is like way too tall and that causes that string buzz in that certain section, that needs to be filed down, but be careful with that. If you don't trust yourself or don't have any experience with that, maybe go and visit a guitar tech or a luthier because once you file something too low, it's just too low. You need to replace that fret, and that's, yeah, you want to avoid that. All right, thanks so much for watching. Leave a comment below and ask whatever is on your mind. If we can, we will answer it, or you might even end up in one of these Q&A videos. Take care. See you in the next video. Bye. Bye.